The Zarelian Empire was the most feared force in the galaxy. Their warships could reduce planets to dust, their soldiers stood 10 feet tall, and their technology was centuries ahead of most species. For Queen Velaxa, ruling over countless worlds was easy. No one dared to challenge her empire. Then she heard about humans. A small colony on the outer edge of her empire, a planet called Venera 3, had refused to surrender. It was a foolish decision. Humans were weak, barely capable of space travel. They had no advanced energy weapons, no powerful fleets, no superior warriors. Compared to the Zarelians, they were nothing. Queen Velaxa laughed when she received the report. "Send a small fleet," she said, sitting on her throne. "This will be over in a single day." Her generals nodded. It was a simple task. The Zarelian Empire had crushed stronger enemies before. A handful of human soldiers wouldn't even slow them down. As the Zarelian fleet approached Venera 3, the Queen watched the invasion from the safety of her massive battleship. She expected the humans to surrender the moment they saw her warships in the sky. Instead, they fought back. The first battle. The invasion began with a thunderous attack. Zarelian warships hovered above the planet, sending down waves of energy blasts. The skies burned red as the colony's outer defenses collapsed. But the humans did not run. Instead of fighting in open battle, they disappeared into the ruins, into the forests, into the mountains. They moved in small, invisible squads, striking quickly and vanishing before the Zarelians could react. The Queen frowned as reports came in. "Resistance is stronger than expected," said one of her commanders. "Impossible," she said. "They don't have the numbers." "It's not numbers, Your Majesty," the commander admitted. "It's their tactics. Unpredictable humans." The Zarelian army was powerful, but it was designed for crushing enemies, not hunting them. Humans refused to fight fairly. They ambushed patrols, set traps in abandoned buildings, used hack drones to disable Zarelian equipment. They fired at night and vanished before dawn. Zarelian soldiers, who had never faced this kind of warfare, began to hesitate. They had been trained to fight face to face, to dominate through superior strength and weapons. But how could they fight an enemy that refused to be seen? Still, the Queen was not worried. She laughed at the reports. "Let them struggle. This only makes their defeat more amusing." But deep inside, she felt something strange, annoyance. No species had ever dared to resist her for this long. The first defeat. Days passed, and something unthinkable happened. The Zarelians lost their first major battle. A human strike team had infiltrated one of their landing zones and detonated a fuel depot, destroying dozens of Zarelian ships. When reinforcements arrived, the humans were already gone. Queen Velax's amusement vanished. "This is unacceptable," she said coldly. Her generals shifted nervously. "Your Majesty, we underestimated them. These humans, they're different." "Different? How?" "They were small, weak creatures. They had no advanced weapons, no powerful soldiers. And yet, they had managed to wound her army." She clenched her fists. If these humans thought they could defy the Zarelian Empire, they would soon learn their place. A dangerous enemy. As night fell over Venera 3, human forces prepared for their next attack. They knew they were outnumbered, outgunned, but they were not outsmarted. A veteran human soldier, Captain Ethan Graves, looked at his small team. "They think we're weak," he said. "Let's show them what humans can do." Miles above the planet, Queen Velaxa stared at the battlefield. Her confidence was still strong, but for the first time, she felt something she had never felt before. Doubt. And she hated it. Queen Velaxa stood at the command center of her massive flagship, her golden armor reflecting the dim glow of holographic battle reports. Her lips curled into a smirk as she watched the battlefield unfold. The humans had won a small battle, but it meant nothing. "They are insects," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Let them fight. Their resistance will only make their defeat more entertaining." Her generals, however, looked uneasy. "Your Majesty, these humans are unpredictable," said General Kalos, a veteran of countless wars. "Unpredictable." The Queen laughed. "That is another word for desperate. This war will be over soon." She turned her attention back to the screen, waiting for her armies to wipe out the human forces. Instead, she saw chaos. The battle escalates. On the surface of Venera 3, Zarelian soldiers advanced through the ruined city. Smoke filled the air as buildings crumbled under the weight of the invasion. The Zarelians expected a clear path to victory. They had better weapons, better armor, and advanced technology. But humans fought differently. They used the terrain to their advantage. Underground tunnels, abandoned sewers, and ruined buildings became deadly traps. A squad of Zarelian warriors marched through the remains of an old human market. The moment they stepped forward, explosions erupted from hidden mines, tearing through their ranks. Before they could react, human soldiers opened fire from the rooftops, vanishing before the Zarelians could return fire. "This isn't war," one Zarelian captain growled as he took cover behind a fallen pillar. "This is madness." But for humans, this was war. The Queen's frustration. Back on her flagship, Queen Velox's smile faded. She could not believe what she was seeing. Zarelian forces were supposed to crush the enemy, not struggle against them. "What is happening down there?" she demanded. General Kalos hesitated before speaking. "Your Majesty, the humans are using hit-and-run tactics. They never engage in direct battle. We strike, but they are already gone before we can counterattack." The Queen narrowed her eyes. "They run because they are weak." The general hesitated. Perhaps they are smart. That word bothered the Queen. She had fought hundreds of species, and none had dared to resist her like this. Most surrendered when they saw her fleet in the sky. But humans, they refused to break. She clenched her fists. "Send the elite hunters," she ordered. "Find their leaders. Crush them." A human plan. Deep in the mountains, Captain Ethan Graves studied a holomap with his squad. Every move the Zarelians made was calculated, but also predictable. "They think like conquerors," Ethan said. "They expect us to fight a losing battle. But we're not fighting to survive. We're fighting to win." A young soldier, Diaz, looked at him. "Sir, we're outnumbered. We don't have much ammo left." Ethan grinned. "Then we make them think we have more than we do." He pointed at a key Zarelian command post near the city center. "If we can take out their communications tower, they'll be blind for a few hours." "That won't stop them forever," said another soldier. "It doesn't have to," Ethan said. "It just needs to buy us time." The attack begins. That night, a small team of humans crawled through the wreckage toward the Zarelian command post. The communications tower stood tall, protected by heavy armor and guards. The Queen had doubled the security, expecting an attack. But Ethan and his team didn't plan to fight their way in. They had something better: Zarelian hacking codes they had stolen from a downed enemy ship. One by one, human soldiers silently eliminated guards, using the darkness as their ally. Minutes later, the human hacker, Ortiz, bypassed the security system. "We're in," Ortiz whispered. Ethan nodded. "Set the charges." A minute later, a massive explosion rocked the battlefield as the communications tower collapsed, cutting off Zarelian forces from their high command. The Queen's rage. On her flagship, Queen Veloxa stood frozen as alarms blared. The battle reports flooded in. Her forces had been blinded. She slammed her fist against the screen. "How?" "They got inside, Your Majesty," General Kalos said grimly. "They destroyed the communication network." The Queen's body trembled with rage. "Find them," she growled. "Find every last one of them, and burn them to ash." For the first time, her confidence was shaken. These humans were not like the others. And that terrified her. Queen Veloxa stood in silence as the battle reports flashed before her. Humans had cut off her army's communications, throwing her invasion into chaos. This was supposed to be an easy victory. Instead, her forces were scattered, lost, and unable to coordinate. Her golden claws tapped against the control panel. "They think this small victory matters," she murmured, her voice cold. "They do not understand what happens when they anger me." She turned to General Kalos, whose face was grim. "Deploy the hunter squads," she commanded. "I want every human leader captured or dead." Kalos bowed. "It will be done, Your Majesty." The hunters arrive. Deep in the ruins of Venera III, Captain Ethan Graves and his squad took cover inside an old industrial complex. Smoke from the destroyed communications tower still filled the sky. "We bought ourselves time," said Dias, checking his weapon, "but they'll come for us now." Ethan nodded. "Then we make them pay for it." Before they could move, strange clicking sounds echoed through the ruins. The air felt colder. A soldier named Ortiz whispered, "Something's wrong." Then, a shadow moved. From the darkness, tall figures leaped down, landing silently like ghosts. They wore black armor, their glowing red eyes scanning the area. "They're elite hunters," Ethan muttered. "Stay low, stay quiet." The Xyrelian hunters were different from the normal soldiers. They did not march. They did not speak. They stalked their prey. And now, they were hunting humans. The silent battle. One of the hunters moved toward Dias, its sharp blade gleaming under the moonlight. It never made a sound. No heavy footsteps, no war cries, just pure death approaching. Dias barely had time to react. The blade slashed forward. But Ethan was faster. With a sharp pull of the trigger, a silenced bullet tore through the hunter's head, sending it crashing to the ground. The other hunters whipped around, now aware of the human's location. "Run," Ethan ordered. The squad broke into a sprint as the hunters pursued, moving faster than anything human. Ortiz tossed a flash grenade, blinding the hunters for a moment. That moment saved their lives. They dove into a collapsed tunnel, sliding into the darkness. Ethan's breath was steady as he whispered, "They're good, but not unstoppable." The Queen's growing fury. On the flagship, Queen Velaxa listened to the hunters' reports. They had failed. Not only had humans escaped, but they had killed her best warriors. She rose from her throne, her body tense with rage. "I have conquered worlds, General," she said, her voice sharp as a blade. "But these humans, they refuse to be conquered." Kalos hesitated before speaking. "They fight differently, Your Majesty. They are not stronger than us, but they are smarter." The Queen's eyes burned. Smarter? No. She refused to believe that a primitive species could outthink the Xyrelians. "Prepare my personal guard," she commanded. "I will lead the next attack myself." Kalos's eyes widened. "Your Majesty, that is too dangerous." She raised a claw. "Enough. I will show these humans true fear." For the first time in her long reign, she would step onto the battlefield herself. And she would end this war. The Xyrelian mothership loomed above the ruined city like a silent predator. Inside, Queen Velaxa stood before her elite guard. The chamber was filled with tension as she donned her golden war armor, a rare sight for her soldiers. She was not just a ruler today, she was a warrior. General Kalos bowed. "Your Majesty, I must insist. This is too dangerous." The Queen's violet eyes burned with cold fire. "Enough. If my best soldiers cannot defeat humans, then I shall do it myself." Kalos hesitated, then nodded. "The invasion force is ready. The humans are in the ruins of Venera III." Velaxa smiled. "Good. Then let them see what true power looks like." The humans prepare. In the destroyed city, Captain Ethan Graves and his squad watched the sky with growing concern. The massive warships had stopped their usual bombardment. "They're up to something," said Dias, gripping his rifle. "They're afraid," Ortiz smirked. "We cut off their communications, took down their elite soldiers. They're starting to realize we're not easy prey." But Ethan wasn't convinced. "No, "They're planning something bigger," he said. "We need to move. Now." Before they could retreat, the ground trembled. A loud, eerie hum filled the air, and a new dropship descended from the sky. It was larger, more advanced. This was no ordinary troop carrier. "That's not just any ship," Diaz muttered. "That's a command vessel." The hatch opened, and Queen Velaxa stepped out. The moment was surreal. The Xyrelian ruler, the one who had commanded the war from a distance, was here, walking among the ruins, surrounded by her personal guard. Ethan's grip tightened around his weapon. She's here to end this herself. The Queen's power. Velaxa scanned the ruins, her sharp gaze landing on the human soldiers hidden behind debris. "You should feel honored," she said, her voice echoing. "No ruler has ever stepped onto a battlefield for your kind." Ethan didn't reply. He knew her type, proud, arrogant, and convinced of their own superiority. But pride had weaknesses. She raised her clawed hand, and her guards advanced like shadows, moving with deadly precision. The battle erupted in an instant. Bullets tore through the air. Explosions shook the ruins. The Xyrelian warriors moved like ghosts, dodging fire with inhuman speed. Ethan's squad fought back with everything they had. But this time, it wasn't enough. One by one, his soldiers were forced to retreat as the enemy closed in. And then, Velaxa herself entered the fight. She moved faster than any of her soldiers, dodging gunfire with unnatural grace. With a swift motion, she lifted Diaz off the ground, her claws tightening around his throat. "You fight well," she admitted, "but you are still only human." She threw him aside, sending him crashing into a wall. Ethan gritted his teeth. She wasn't just a commander, she was a warrior. And she was winning. A new plan. The squad regrouped inside a collapsed building. Diaz was injured, Ortiz was low on ammo, and they were running out of options. Ethan exhaled sharply. "We can't fight her directly. She's too fast, too strong." "Then what?" Ortiz asked. "Surrender." Ethan shook his head. "No, we outsmart her." He studied the battlefield. The Xyrelians relied on their speed and agility. But speed meant nothing if they had nowhere to move. His gaze landed on an abandoned power plant nearby. The underground tunnel still worked. A plan formed in his mind. "We lure her inside," Ethan said. "Then we trap her." Ortiz nodded. "Sounds crazy." Diaz groaned. Then it just might work. They had one chance to turn the tide. As the Queen searched for them, the humans vanished into the darkness, and the real battle was about to begin. The ruins of Venera III were eerily quiet. Smoke curled from shattered buildings, and the scent of scorched metal filled the air. The human soldiers had disappeared into the shadows, leaving the battlefield empty and silent. Queen Velaxa stood in the middle of the destruction, her violet eyes scanning the ruins. She was growing impatient. Her elite guard moved swiftly, their sharp senses searching for any sign of life. But there was nothing. General Kalos approached cautiously. "Your Majesty, the humans are hiding." Velax's claws twitched. "They are not hiding. They are planning something." She had underestimated them before. She wouldn't make that mistake again. "Spread out," she ordered. "Find them. Flush them out." The humans' plan. Deep inside the ruins, Captain Ethan Graves and his team waited in the shadows of an abandoned power plant. The tunnels beneath the structure were still intact. The ancient machinery hummed with trapped energy, its circuits flickering like a sleeping beast. Ethan turned to Ortiz and Diaz. "She's strong. Too strong. We can't fight her in open battle." "So what do we do?" Ortiz asked. Ethan pointed at the tunnels below. "We lead her down there. She won't have space to move fast." Diaz winced, still injured from the last fight. "And once she's inside," Ethan's eyes darkened, "we trap her, and we bring the whole place down." Baiting the Queen. Outside, Velaxa moved through the ruins, her armor gleaming under the dim sky. The silence was unnatural, too perfect. Then, a single gunshot. It echoed through the streets, coming from the direction of the power plant. Velaxa smiled. There you are. She moved fast, leaping over broken buildings, her guards following like shadows. As she reached the power plant, another shot rang out. It came from inside. Humans, she whispered, foolish as always. She stepped inside, and the trap was set. Inside the beast's lair. The interior was dark and narrow. Steam hissed from rusted pipes, and flickering lights barely illuminated the twisted metal corridors. Velax's sharp eyes adjusted quickly. Her guards followed, their movements swift and silent. Then she heard it. Footsteps. The humans were close. She stepped forward. Boom! An explosion rocked the tunnel, and the entrance collapsed behind her. Her guards were sealed outside. For the first time, Queen Velaxa was alone. The hunt begins. A voice echoed through the tunnels. Ethan's voice. Welcome, Your Majesty. She growled. You think a cage will hold me? Ethan chuckled. No, but it'll slow you down. Velaxa moved forward, claws scraping against the walls. You are delaying the inevitable, human. I will find you. She could hear their movements, the sound of heartbeat and breath in the air. Then, a flash of movement. She lunged, but it was a trick, a decoy. A metal plate slammed shut, cutting off another path. She hissed in frustration. The tunnels were a maze. She was not hunting them. They were hunting her. Final stand. Ethan and his team reached the control room deep inside the plant. The old systems were still functional. The plant's emergency lockdown system had enough power left for one final activation. Ethan grabbed the control lever. Once she's inside the core, he said, we seal her in. Ortiz nodded. And then Ethan exhaled. We make sure she never gets out. Diaz swallowed. Let's hope this works. As Queen Velaxa stalked through the tunnels, the humans prepared for their final move. And the battle was far from over. The tunnels were silent, but Queen Velaxa could feel the humans watching her. Her claws scraped against the metal floor as she moved carefully through the dimly lit corridor. She was alone now, trapped in this maze while her soldiers were stuck outside. She growled in frustration. Pathetic humans, she muttered, thinking they can outsmart me. Her violet eyes glowed in the darkness as she scanned the surroundings. She could hear water dripping, the hum of old machinery, and the distant sound of footsteps. They were close. She smiled. Hiding in the shadows, humans, it won't save you. She took a deep breath, her powerful lungs expanding. Then, boom! A sudden explosion shook the tunnel, and a metal gate slammed shut behind her. Velaxa spun around. Another trap. Her eyes narrowed. The humans had planned this well. But it didn't matter. She would find them. And when she did, they would regret ever challenging her. The human strategy. In the control room, Ethan, Ortiz, and Diaz watched the Queen through the old surveillance monitors. Diaz wiped sweat from his forehead. She's inside the final sector. Ethan nodded. Good. Now we just need to get her into the core chamber. Ortiz looked at him. And after that, Ethan's face was serious. We lock her in. Diaz glanced at the explosives they had set up earlier. And if she gets out? Ethan didn't answer. He didn't want to think about that. He grabbed his rifle. Let's move. We have one shot at this. The chase begins. Velaxa moved through the tunnels, her senses sharp. Then, movement. She turned sharply. A shadow dashed across the corridor. She lunged, her claws tearing through the air. But it was too late. Another explosion erupted, and the walls began to collapse. She barely dodged the falling debris. They were leading her somewhere. Her lips curled into a smirk. Fine. I'll play your little game. She followed the footsteps, her heart pounding with anticipation. If the humans wanted a final fight, she would give them one. Face to face. Ethan and his team reached the core chamber, a massive circular room filled with old machinery. The walls were lined with heavy blast doors, reinforced with thick metal. Ortiz and Diaz took position behind cover. Ethan stood in the center, waiting. His gun was ready. Then she arrived. Queen Velaxa stepped through the entrance, her towering figure filling the doorway. Her armor was scratched, her claws stained with battle, but she still looked powerful. She smiled. "So, this is where you wanted me to be." Ethan raised his gun. "Yeah, welcome to your cage." Velaxa chuckled. "I don't see a cage. I see prey." Then she charged. The final battle. Ethan dived to the side as Velaxa's claws slashed through the air, barely missing him. Ortiz and Diaz opened fire, their bullets sparking against her armor. She moved fast, dodging and deflecting their attacks. Then, with a single powerful leap, she closed the distance. She grabbed Ortiz and threw him aside like a ragdoll. Diaz tried to retreat, but she was too quick. She knocked the gun from his hands and pinned him against the wall. She smiled, her fangs glinting. Weak. Then Ethan moved. He grabbed a nearby lever and pulled it down. The heavy blast doors slammed shut. Velaxa turned just in time to see the entrance ceiling behind her. Her eyes widened. What? Ethan stepped back, breathing hard. Game over. The Queen's fury. Velaxa roared, slamming her fists against the doors. The walls shook, but the metal held strong. She turned to Ethan, rage in her eyes. "You think this will stop me?" Ethan exhaled. No. He lifted a detonator in his hand. "But this will." Velaxa's expression changed. Ethan pressed the button. Boom! A massive explosion rocked the core chamber. The walls shook, and fire erupted from the vents. The Queen stumbled, the heat overwhelming. The humans escaped through an emergency exit, just as the entire chamber collapsed behind them. The last thing they saw was Velaxa roaring in fury as the flames consumed the room. Escape and victory. Ethan, Ortiz, and Diaz emerged outside the ruins, coughing from the smoke. They collapsed onto the ground, exhausted but alive. Ortiz groaned. "Did we do it?" Ethan stared at the burning structure. "I don't know." Diaz whispered, "No one could survive that, right?" But Ethan wasn't sure. Because deep inside the rubble, something stirred. And the battle wasn't over yet. The ruins were still burning. Smoke and dust filled the air. Ethan, Ortiz, and Diaz stood outside, watching the destruction. Ortiz wiped his face. "It's over, right?" Ethan didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the wreckage. Then, movement. A large piece of metal shifted. A deep guttural growl echoed through the ruins. Ethan's heart pounded. No way. From the fire and rubble, Queen Velaxa emerged. Her armor was cracked, her body covered in burns, but she was still standing. Her violet eyes glowed with fury. "You think this can stop me?" Diaz took a step back. "Oh no, she's still alive." Ethan clenched his fists. "Then we end this. Now." The final fight. Velaxa charged. Ethan and his team opened fire. Bullets struck her armor, but she kept moving. She grabbed Ortiz and threw him aside. He crashed into a rock, groaning in pain. Diaz fired a grenade launcher. Boom! The explosion hit her directly, but when the smoke cleared, she was still there. She grinned, weak. Then she lunged at Diaz. But Ethan moved first. He grabbed a broken metal rod from the debris and drove it into her side. She roared in pain, stumbling back. Ethan didn't stop. He grabbed another weapon, a high-energy pulse gun from his belt. He aimed. "This ends now." He pulled the trigger. A powerful blue blast struck Velaxa in the chest. She screamed. Her body shook violently, and she fell to her knees. Her breathing was ragged, her strength fading. For the first time, she looked afraid. A warrior's end. Velaxa coughed, looking up at Ethan. "You are not like the others. Ethan stood over her, his gun still aimed. You underestimated us. She gave a weak laugh. I did. Her violet eyes softened. Humans are dangerous, stronger than I thought. She closed her eyes. Her body went still. The great alien queen had fallen. Victory at a cost. Ethan lowered his gun. The fight was over. Ortiz and Diaz slowly got up, breathing heavily. Ortiz winced. That was insane. Diaz nodded. She almost killed us all. Ethan looked at Velox's fallen form. But we won. They stood there for a moment, letting the truth sink in. Then, from the distance, human dropships appeared in the sky. Reinforcements had arrived. The legend of humanity. Back at the military base, the soldiers celebrated. The Queen's defeat spread across the galaxy. The war had changed. Aliens who once saw humans as weak now feared them. Humanity had proven itself stronger than anyone imagined. As Ethan sat alone, looking at the stars, he smiled. This was just the beginning. Humanity was not to be underestimated.